Hello and welcome back to another day in the arena. It's me, it's CGB, and today we're going to be introducing the deck we're going to play this week, and it is one of my longtime favorites for as long as I've played Magic, Blue White Control. I have a few adjustments to make on the deck that I'm going to make on the fly after some consideration, but for the most part it's going to stay the same. So I'm going to make those changes right now very quickly. I'm going to add one copy of Negate. I've decided that with Planeswalkers being a thing again, and of course with Approach of the Second Sun out there, sometimes you just need another hard counter, not another bounce spell. So we'll go to one copy of Negate. I'm also going to go to one copy of Gideon's Reproach to have a little more interaction early for things that have resolved and things that may have vigilance, such as night tokens. What we're going to do there is tick down our blink of an eye one more time to 2, and instead play one Gideon's Reproach and one Negate. I think that is a good package after some consideration, but let's get into the overall deck. We talked about this. It can also hit anything from a Glorybringer to an Eternalized Earthshaker Kenra, which can be annoying. Playing right there with it is 4 copies of Seal Away, great removal spell that takes out tapped creatures only. Important to remember that. So if you do have your Gideon's Reproach or your Essence Scatter and your opponent plays a Vigilance creature, you cannot seal it away, so you may be more inclined to use another spell. Blink of an Eye is an excellent spell with a lot more utility than it appears. Not just a bounce spell that can gain you some tempo early or cantrip late, but you can bounce your own permanents in all kinds of interesting ways. An example would be that you play Seal Away targeting an Eternalized Earthshaker Kenra. There's nothing under the Seal Away, the token's permanently exiled. Now you can blink of an eye back your Seal Away and use it on something else. You can also do this if you seal away a tiny 1/1 goblin earlier in the game, but need to seal away a Hazoret later in the game, which is more added utility. Also, if your Planeswalker is under lethal pressure, you can blink it back to your hand and start the process over, sometimes with more loyalty than you would have had otherwise. 4 copies of Essence Scatter, as it's a creature-based format. Essence Scatter is an excellent piece. You can't have enough of these when your opponent decides it's time to resolve their Scarab Gods. Then there is the Negate that we added, the Search for Azcanta, just a one of. We're going to get into why, and if I had to describe it, you have to look at the entire context of the deck. I would say that Search for Azcanta as a legendary enchantment has big time diminishing returns when you draw 2, so playing multiples is always risky. I seem to get unlucky more than most. I always feel like I've drawn both Search for Azcantas in my top 10 cards, and it does not feel good and sets you behind. Second, as an enchantment, it's vulnerable in a way that other parts of the deck may not be to things like Thrashing Brontodon. As a land, when it is flipped, it's vulnerable to things like Field of Ruin, which is caught on in a big way and is in most decks. And finally, this used to be the way that the blue deck would get ahead. Now it does not need Search for Azcanta to get ahead. It has another play that it can make in the mid-game that we'll get to that pulls it very far ahead if unchecked. In the 3s, we've got a Gideon of the Trials, which I think pretty self-explanatory. You can lock down a permanent, or you can make a Gideon emblem. Sometimes you can attack with a 4/4 indestructible, though that is not the high priority of this deck. The emblem's very useful, as it says you can't lose the game, and your opponents can't win the game. It turns off Approach of the Second Sun, while also keeping you from decking yourself, so even if you have to draw from an empty library, the emblem will keep you from dying. We'll get to some things about that. Wizard's Retort, you can use Cancel, you can use Admiral's Order, you can use a mix of them, whatever you want to do. I'm not sick of the artwork on Wizard's Retort. We do not have wizards. There's no reason other than I want a hard counterspell in this spot. Next up, Cast Out, which we're using here as a 4 of, can exile any permanent or cycle if we don't need to exile a permanent at instant speed, which is what we're looking for. Settle the Wreckage, which in multiples becomes stronger and stronger. If you only have one Settle the Wreckage, your opponent plays around it by attacking with a few creatures. Great, you bought some time and you exile their creatures. If you have 2 Settle the Wreckage, then the opponent's next attack, can they afford to play around Settle the Wreckage again and keep giving you more time? Probably not. So they make a bigger attack, you settle that. If you have 3, your opponent's not playing around Settle the Wreckage anymore. They're just attacking with everything every time and hoping to end this madness, and Settle gets them even harder. If you only had the 1, your opponent playing around it could let them create a board state where they could win after you play the Settle. We have one copy of Lyra Dawnbringer. It is not a good card against black, but if you are playing, and it's not very good against blue, Essence Scatter, Ravenous Chupacabra, Vraska's Contempt, these are the cards that punish Lyra Dawnbringer as a win condition. But if you are playing against the other colors, white, they do have things like Cast Out, but you can cast out or use Blink of an Eye. Red often has to stack multiple removal spells to kill it, which you can hopefully counter one of them, or again, bounce your Lyra Dawnbringer. And green, which usually has very few ways to deal with it. If you are against any of those colors and Lyra comes down, the game can just be over. And you do need some amount of life gain for the deck. Teferi, Great Planeswalker, new from Dominaria. If you don't know how powerful it is, you just have to play against it a few times. This is the secret win condition of the deck. You'll see that we are not running Approach of the Second Sun or any other creatures besides the one of Lyra Dawnbringer. She's not usually, only in certain games can she end a game by herself, and Gideon of the Trials attacking is not usually the plan. The plan is often a concession as you approach the ultimate, which says when you get an emblem, whenever you draw a card, exile target permanent opponent controls. Most players just cannot bear to see this. However, if you get that stubborn hardcore magician who says, show me your win con, well, the -3 of Teferi, put target non-land permanent on top of its owner's library, third from the top, can target Teferi itself. So if you don't want to deck, if you are about to run out of cards and you don't have a Gideon and an emblem, you can play Teferi, you can target Teferi and put Teferi back on top of your deck, draw it the next turn, do it every turn until your opponent runs out of cards. The idea here, of course, is that you can stop everything your opponent played, or you've already done the -8 emblem and exiled all of your opponent's permanents with every draw step. On that note, there are 2 commit to memories, which the commit side continues the tradition of making your opponent miserable and dealing with any spell or non-land permanent. But the aftermath side of memory is kind of the hidden win con too, whereas you ultimate the Teferi, then you flash back the memory and immediately exile 7 permanents from your opponent's side of the board and have a handful of permanents yourself, is often enough to get the scoop. And if that's not enough, how about a pull from tomorrow where you also draw just however many you can and exile your opponent's permanents. The mana base is 27 land. I know that may feel high. I was still missing land drops, even at 26, and you'll notice that we're not playing Hieroglyphic Illumination or Opt, things like that to smooth the draw, so actually hitting your land drops is very important, and naturally, that I would say. And the 27th land I'm using is Arch of Orazca, which I think is better than the second search for Azcanta in this particular style of deck, where hitting those land drops is more important than having the legendary enchantment on the battlefield trying to mill yourself looking for those land drops. So that's where that's where the Arch of Orazca comes in, and of course later in the game you might be able to draw some cards off it if you're in a spot. 4 Field of Ruin are useful, of course, to keep the opponent's flip lands from messing with you, but also to make the opponent shuffle their deck. And cards that would like the opponent to shuffle their deck include Commit, which you put them in second from the top and then make them shuffle it away, and Teferi, which can put it in third from the top and then make the opponent shuffle that card away. So important interactions to look out for. Something I haven't done in my other deck techs, we're going to briefly take a look at the collection of blue and white cards and talk about cards that some people may want played that I am not playing. Slash of Talons would be in the sideboard if we had a sideboard, but I believe it's too narrow for the main deck. Many decks will not present good targets. Baffling End is similar. We have other cards to do the job at instant speed, whereas Baffling End at sorcery speed. Plus, when it dies, the opponent does get a dinosaur regardless of what you exiled in the first place, can sometimes be a problem. This is not a card you could use Blink of an Eye, for an example, to return to your hand and recast without giving your opponent a 3/3. The next things up, let's see, what other things are people going to say? What about that? What about this? What about this card? I love this card. It's so good. It's so good. There's definitely a fair share of them as you look around, but sometimes we have to scroll a bit to find them. Ixalan's Binding is a very powerful card, and if you are short of Settle the Wreckages or Commit to Memories, Ixalan's Binding is an excellent substitute. The sorcery speed is what keeps it out of it for me, and the fact that we have so much removal already, sometimes your cast out just won't have a target, but you'll want to cycle it, makes it a better utility play. Also, we're not in that spot where if our cast out gets cast out, we can never do anything about the binding. We have lots of other answers to the binding. Blink of an eye can bounce the binding, Negate can counter the binding, and the commits can shuffle away the binding, and so can the Teferi can bury the binding. So we're not in one of those weird spots where running a mix is important. If we were a tap out deck, I think binding's a better card all day. Other things, more Lyras. More Lyras are an option, but I think I explained why you don't want too many of them. Having one makes for a good victory condition against certain decks. Against those other decks, you probably just never even cast it, as even putting it in the graveyard gives your opponent a Scarab God target that is very threatening. So there are games where you just never even cast this card, and there are games where it straight wins the game on 5. Adding more to the deck would have to be a meta consideration. And Hour of Revelation blows up your own Sealaways, it blows up your own castouts, and your own Planeswalkers, so that is why it is not played. Approach of the Second Sun. I consider 2 different decks. I consider this to be blue-white control, and I consider Approach of the Second Sun to be a blue-white deck that's almost a combo deck. And it is another deck I play and that I have, that I will introduce someday on this channel, I'm sure. Please understand at this point that what I'm going with in this deck is the concept that a 7-mana sorcery that you have to cast twice to win the game is not as reliable as the 5-mana planeswalker that can take over the game by itself and create an unbeatable situation. So that is what I'm focused on in my blue-white, very narrow on win cons control deck. Next up, we're not running things like Opt or Hieroglyphic Illumination to smooth the draws the way other people might. We are relying on the Search for Azcanta, the Pull from Tomorrow, and the awesome removal spells and the Teferis to keep the cards coming. Now, there might be games where that's a little stalled. We draw slightly awkward answers and a lot of land, but none of those card draws, and we might miss those cards. But I think at this point, there aren't many games against the creature decks like green and red and dinos that are running around where you have time to cast a lot of card draw spells, or that you can remove lands for card draw spells, because I've just been burned too many times by keeping a hand with Opt and Hieroglyphic Illumination, thinking I'll find the lands I need, only to have very awkward draws that can't keep up with my opponent. Censor is a very similar thing. It's hard to catch people with a good censor nowadays, and cycling it doesn't guarantee that you'll get something useful. So I would prefer to know what's in my hand and know how to line up my answers and have hard counters to censor. Moving right on down the list, you could run more negates if you felt that confident about your metagame call. I do not. I talked about Search for Azcanta and why I don't think it is now required in high numbers like it was in the past. It is probably technically right to play multiple cancels and multiple Wizard's Retorts, and if you want to make these adjustments to the deck because of a card like Gideon's Intervention that could lock out either cancel or Wizard's Retort, you are welcome to. I'll just make that adjustment now to show you just how okay and probably right it is. Moving right on down the line, I'm not a Secrets of the Golden City type. Tapping out on my turn to draw cards is not the priority. Supreme Will, I just feel that the hard counter is needed. The longer the game goes, the more you need the hard counter, and it's not guaranteed that your top 4 will hold the answer that you seek. So having the cancels and Wizard's Retorts, I've chosen as the priority to win these very long games that this deck does descend into very frequently. Moving right on down the line, we continue to find just a splattering of blue noise and things like that. All kinds of cards. Some people might want a Nezahal Primal Tide for the mirror. I think I'm pretty well set up against the Primal Tide in that I can use like a Gideon on the Trials to keep it from dealing damage if I find it. Lots of settles and cast outs and commits and Teferis that can force my opponent to just keep dumping their hand, probably more than they can handle. I don't think I need one myself. I'm confident in the win conditions I'm running. It would definitely be a one of in the sideboard if I had a sideboard though. And here's Syncopate. This is another controversial one. We have a lot of fans of Syncopate out there. I discovered a Nombo with Syncopate, and it is Settle the Wreckage and Syncopate. Settle the Wreckage, and Syncopate. After the first Settle the Wreckage, it is very hard to snag even a mid-range threat with your Syncopate. After the second Settle the Wreckage, Syncopate is basically no longer a spell. It is something that will counter almost nothing because your opponent has so much land. I do like Syncopate the card, and I use it up to a 3 of and 4 of in control decks such as blue-black that do not play Settle the Wreckage. But if I'm playing 4 Settle the Wreckages, I have found it better to be without Syncopate entirely and play those hard counters like I talked about that work regardless of mana. You don't want to run multiple pull from tomorrows. It's so bad in your opening hand. You really want it at about the halfway point of the game where you just need a big play to take over, and that's the only time you want it. So running multiples seems like a very bad move. And aside from that, I think that covers most of the cards people would play. All right, let's take the deck out, see how we do. Full disclosure, this is my second recording of this video. My first recording was absolutely awesome. We played against a great variety of decks, red-blue wizards and merfolk and red-green dinos and blue-black control. We won all of them. There were very close matches and I was thrilled. And then I checked the recording and found that video was not captured. So there's a lot of pressure on me right here to make this set of games just as good. So we have the Search, the Gideon, the pull that we don't really want right now, and we do have enough land. On the draw, we could get run over, but I think this is a hand that you keep, knowing that most of your deck is the reactive removal spells that you need. If we simply draw land from here and nothing else, we could be in big trouble, and it does look like our opponent's going to play red. So already regretting my keep, but let's see if the deck treats us well. And Seal Away right off the top is a welcome sight. A welcome sight, which is probably going to delay the Search for Azcanta from entering the battlefield, as our opponent's right off to the races with the red deck. The perfect 1-2 opening that you're looking for, playing that pile of steaming garbage that I hate, but what can you do? The opponent has every right to build it right now in the arena. Can't stop them, as we've seen. You just have to try to deal with them. Here they come. Another haste threat means that our opponent gets plenty of damage in this turn. Fortunately, we've drawn a lot of Seal Aways in a row. We have an option here of playing a Gideon of the Trials. Our opponent, if they Hazoret us, that doesn't get us. So I think this is a good play. Our opponent may go with something like Lightning Strike and Fanatical Firebrand, but if they do, it takes their entire turn. So I actually like this. And we're going to target
Virtue will always
the Kenra.
No, I
and
don't
if our
think
opponent
so.
takes the opportunity to tap out for a Hazoret, we still have it covered with Seal Away. And if our opponent doesn't kill the Gideon, then we get the Gideon effect for a good portion of the game. Our opponent has either drawn 3 lands in a row, or at least 2. They may have had Sunscorched Desert in their opener, but the fact that they led on Ramanop Ruins implies that they've still got spells in hand and they've just been drawing land off the top. Kind of a concerning situation, I would say. You may say that your Gideon just died, but in effect it traded with a Lightning Strike, so it's like we killed the Lightning Strike. And it gained us 1, 2, 3 life because our opponent focused on killing Gideon and not us for a change. Let's see. I think it's worth the gamble here to get out the Seal Away, or not the Seal Away, the Search for Azcanta, to start trying to filter our draws into all the removal that we're going to need to win this game. Our opponent might Lightning Strike our face, or they might have Magma Spray or Braid, both of which are cards we very much want them to draw in this matchup. We're also going to need Field of Ruin for these Ramanop Ruins so that we aren't closed out by the damage from them. So we need to search for Field of Ruin as quickly as possible with Search for Azcanta. There's not that many ways to gain life apart from the Lyra, and that's important to keep in mind playing this deck. Okay, our opponent's going to Magma Spray their own Earthshaker Kenra, which in my opinion is a very bad play. It exiles the Earthshaker Kenra. If we were playing an Hour of Revelation or something that would blow up our Seal Away, Our opponent would not like it. All right, graveyard. Basic land is not what we're looking for here. Although we'll take lands where they are. It is the way it is. This Fanatical Firebrand chipping away, though, could be very frustrating. So in this spot, I think I want to cast Commit. Our opponent hasn't drawn their 5th land. Making them redraw cards that they have to cast can be useful there. Saving the seal away so that we can play it along with another spell in the future seems right to me. And we'll see if our opponent has another creature to play here. Perhaps another Frostodon, perhaps a Hazoret. Those would be the things that would make sense. I guess Magma Phoenix, but it's a Daring Buccaneer, which isn't the scariest, but is still a threat. Yes, we will library this because if our opponent attacks with both creatures and we play Settle the Wreckage, they may shuffle away their Frostodon to get the lands. It turns on the ruins, which I hate, but it's better than creatures, which are a consistent source of damage and don't cost additional mana in most cases. All right, here they come. They both attacked last turn. There's no reason that they wouldn't this turn. So let's settle them. And if our opponent takes the lands, they shuffle their Frostodon away. Check that graveyard, see how we're doing on search. Still a ways off, but you can't complain too much about having relevant draws instead of things that you would just throw in the graveyard. Of course, if we pull from tomorrow, we're right there to flip Azcanta. If we get a break for a turn, I guarantee you that's what we'll do. Our opponent probably thinking about whether or not to draw this Frostodon, but they eventually choose the lands over the Frostodon, and they do have another land. So now we're in the Ramen Up part of the game where we need to find Field of Ruin before our opponent gets all the damage in. It doesn't look like it's going to work out for us as they can now Ramen Up us, untap, Ramen Up us, and then we're at 6. And we're just hoping that they stop drawing Ramen Up Ruins or that we find Lyra Dawnbringer. So here we go. The game is afoot. The great game of Magic. If we had Disallow, we would have another avenue to countering these activated abilities, but stuck with Cancel, not an option. Down to 8. Can our opponent find a threat? Appears not. The risk of tapping out here, of course, is getting lightning struck. The Frostodon returns, whether we want it to or not. How about that? And so we'll go to our end step, and we'll pull for 4. This would be a great time to find Field of Ruin, as our opponent doesn't have the mana to activate the ruins here. And we found one. So life is beautiful. And now we're on 7, so we can flip Azcanta regardless of what's on top of our deck. We can keep it shame-free, and I will keep it. There's not many things our opponent can do to get around Seal Away. They can, say, resolve a Hazoret and never attack with it. Doesn't that sound fun? And we're going to definitely take that Ruins out while we have this opportunity where they don't have the mana to activate it in response. Cards like Hash Up Oasis say you can only use it as sorcery. Why didn't we make that on Ramen Up Ruins, guys? Come on now, Wizards. Come on. Ramen Up Ruins should definitely say sorcery speed. Even then, it would probably be ridiculously powerful. And now we have Commit and Seal Away open, as well as a Wizard's Retort. Feeling a little safe, but the red matchup is never truly safe, I would argue. Let's seal you away, Rampaging Frostodon. We've seen enough of you. And this was an example of where Rampaging Frostodon is worse than a Chain Whirler that would have at least gotten a point of damage in. With no creatures, the Rampaging Frostodon isn't holding much back other than the one of Lyra. So there we go. We got the win. The red deck scooped it up. Didn't want to see us activating Search for Azcanta, getting that value for the rest of the game. And we yet again have a slow hand, but we have the lands we need, the colors we need, and the plays. So I'm going to keep it. And we'll see if the red decks are out yet again. But no, it's Scattered Groves, so something a little different. That's exciting. I think we will just play our cycling land, as a tap land later down the line would really throw us off. So green-white, what are you up to? Nothing so far. Interesting. Perhaps they're also on a slow draw, and with this pause in priority seems to give away a cast out or some cycling card. Here comes a Thrashing Brontodon. Card I just generally don't enjoy seeing. We could also just play Gideon and lock it down, but I think using our Essence Scatter here is fine. I'm not sure exactly what all is in the deck, but getting our cards played and staying at parity can't be too bad. Gideon. And we will get an emblem.
You face me, you will only hurt yourself. Save yourself and give up
Upping
now.
the loyalty doesn't do anything right now. If our opponent does cast Gideon out, the cool thing about the emblem is they can attack us for what they think is lethal, and in response we can cast out their cast out, and now we have a Gideon Planeswalker, and they can't kill us. So there is some value to just having an emblem. Also, Shauna here can't be the target of abilities, and Gideon's +1 is very much an ability. Therefore, well, we can plus it, but we can't target Shauna. If we make a 4/4 an attack, I guess we get some damage in, but it seems like we have to plus it on something to kind of shrug off these hits. I'll go for the 4/4. I'm not sure that's correct. The damage is unlikely to matter, whereas keeping Gideon alive should be a priority. So we'll see. If our opponent has like a Spore Swarm or something like that, it wouldn't matter. But if they play 2 creatures here and threaten to attack Gideon for lethal, we'll have a tough choice. Here comes a Llanowar Elves. What else have we got? Just combat? Our opponent does not attack, so they are concerned. They shouldn't be too concerned. This is a very annoying card. It plays around Seal Away, and it plays around Cast Out, which are abilities. But it doesn't play around Settle, so our opponent might be concerned about that. Let's cycle this land. And there is a Cast Out. More Teferi, so we will plus to prevent all damage from the Llanowar Elves. Our opponent likely with some impactful 4-drops. Teferi here, a bit risky, to be honest. Could die. What could come out of this deck next could be very explosive, but with 2 of them, I think it's worth the risk. Burying the Llanowar Elves would be a bit crazy.
I am not
also, just having the mana up, our opponent may have to respect certain plays we could make. Most of the time when you play Teferi and untap 2 lands, they assume you have something. And this is where having a cast out in hand, holding that priority because of that cycling, is very helpful. Makes it hard for our opponent to guess what we might cast here. Voice of Plenty, of course, can shut down Settle the Wreckage, and is pretty annoying. Okay, the Llanowar Elves will not deal damage because of Gideon. So we have to use Gideon here on the Voice of Plenty, which is unfortunate, as we'll probably have to cast it out as well. Teferi here will plus.
We need to move quickly,
as we do have another, and we'll try to set up. Now we can't use Settle the Wreckage. So what I should have done is cast out the Voice, and then plus the Gideon targeting the Elves. So we have a bit of an oops moment. Sorry about that. 7, 8, 9. So we're not on City's Blessing mana yet, so I'll keep the Arch hidden. But I do want to start getting the fields out of my hand, and maybe we'll end up in a situation where I can use them. But yeah, since we're going to do this right now, I should not have targeted. I should not have targeted the Shy with the Gideon. So forgive me for my transgressions. But hopefully we can all learn from it. If our opponent has another one, then we're in trouble. But if our opponent does not, I think we want to use this turn to cast our Settle and get the Shauna off the battlefield, as it is shockingly annoying to deal with. Teferi can't target it, Gideon can't target it, Cast Out can't target it, and Seal Away can't target it. Essence Scatter can counter it, Gideon's Reproach can kill it, which is one of the reasons I subbed one of those in. Blink of an Eye can bounce it on Sarah's wing, so it's now a 3/3 flying lifelink vigilance creature, so getting more annoying by the play. And we will have to make this play, which is not... But our opponent's seen enough. They do not want to play in a world where they cannot kill our planeswalkers. So, Settle the Wreckage, doing Settle the Wreckage things. I am grateful in this moment that we've had 3 different opponents. Sometimes I feel like Arena does nothing but match me against the same people over and over again. Over and over and over again. I had a day yesterday where Legend, LVD, another YouTuber, was streaming, and I was in his chat room and just trying to play for fun on the side, like I wasn't trying to focus on anything, and I got paired against Legend 5 times, so every time I had to turn off the stream and try to play a decent game of Magic, and each time I was just like, I just want to get back. I just want to get back in and watch. I didn't want to have to work this hard. All right, we'll keep the Blink of an Eye, and we'll keep this ugly hand that can hopefully buy enough time for us to play the Hero of Dominaria. If we are playing against control, I'll be grateful. Even though we're down a card, we have a lot of land drops to hit. And it does look like you may see a control matchup here. And I'm going to hang on to this farmland. I think cycling it would be a good move. All blue so far. Secrets of the Golden City? Yes, absolutely. Opponent getting further up in cards. But will they be able to deal with the Hero of Dominaria? Red, I see. Interesting. So a Braid is the discard. We play our dual lands out, not our fields. We don't want an opponent to see our fields in case they have something like a Search for Azcanta that they're thinking about committing to the board. And this could turn into a staring match. A long staring match. I'm not sure what their deck entails. Not sure how it tries to win. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to do against it. I'm pretty sure that casting Teferi isn't on the list. I'm pretty sure that's a counterspell waiting to happen. Opponent without a hieroglyphic illumination or something of that nature here. Let's see. It might be a Mirari's Conjecture, thinking about trying to play that, get back their secrets. And let's, we don't need to do that. Not yet. Let's hang on. That's a good draw. Force our opponent to keep finding their land drops. Settle in. I mean, you on YouTube, you find smart people. You will know how we're doing here, because you will be able to see whether or not this video takes forever. I'm going to assume, though, right now as I sit here, that I'm in for a long match. So I have interesting options with Primal Amulet, such as Blink of an Eye or Cast Out. My fear is that both could be met with a counterspell, so I'm tempted to negate this, but then my opponent hasn't tapped their mana, and then I don't have a clear resolution to Teferi, so I'm going to let it resolve, and then we're going to fight them on their end step a little bit. So let's go for the Cast Out. I expect our opponent to play some kind of a counterspell. Nope. Interesting. Interesting. So now we really want to draw a land. We do not. Might be worth throwing this Teferi out there, though. Our opponent not messing with that cast out, and we're around Censor and Syncopate. We're not around Negate, but you would think our opponent would negate that. But if we wait one more turn, we get to pull from tomorrow on end step, and we'll almost certainly be able to cast it, but our opponent will have more mana available. So this is tough, and I'm going to go for it, and I'm not sure it's right. Feels a lot more right now, doesn't it?
I won't hide from the world.
Alrighty then. Opponent targeting? They have a blink of an eye. Okay, well, we use some mana and we draw a card and we still get to untap our lands. So they're going to try to fight us over this next turn. Field of Ruins are here, and it does make Primal Amulet less of a problem if it can't do anything against these Field of Ruins. And now we'll see how our opponent wants to proceed. They have 5 cards, and we have 5 cards. Here comes the Conjecture. So Conjecture, when it comes into play, retrieves an instant from the graveyard. Then after that, it will get a sorcery, and after that, it will double things. It's a very annoying card. Negating it seems wise, considering how our opponent responded to the Teferi. They didn't seem to... Their way of dealing with it was bounce, which reeks of a bit of desperation to me. So I think this is the right play. It would strike me as odd if our opponent's sitting on Negate here. They could have drawn it, but I would force them to find it. And now I'm confident that I should be going for Teferi again. Play our lands first. And here comes the hero of Dominaria. Hopefully continuing to get us ahead further and further on cards until our opponent can't keep up. Our seal aways, I'm sure, are not good in this matchup, nor is our Gideon's Reproach, but cast out is still good, commit is still good. That's why having a number of universal answers is decent. Having Essence Scatter is probably not. And here's an opt from the opponent, which I'm surprised they hadn't used before, but maybe it's what they drew. And again, different art. Mismatched art, no! No! And let's untap those. I always like to keep one field open in case I see something I want to use it on, to use all of our mana. Opponent finds second red somewhere along that drawing spree they went on. But now they're passing turn. And there's Gideon. So, plus the Teferi.
Hurry!
Now that our opponent is on the back foot, we're going to try to keep them busy and using resources whenever possible, so we're not going to be shy about running this Gideon out, and it continues to show that our opponent somehow just doesn't have the counterspell here today. And let's make that emblem. Force our opponent to deal with the Gideon on the table and not fight with fire us twice to the dome, as the Conjecture deck seems to do. If you're not familiar with the Conjecture deck, if this is totally new to you, Mirari's Conjecture, doubling a spell on the last chapter, is you can use Fight with Fire for 9 mana, which deals 10 damage to any kinds of targets. And if you double it and your opponent's at 20, you win the game. You can just go upstairs for 20 for 9 mana. It's an interesting combo. It does have some issues. Here comes the Fight with Fire. It certainly does have some issues. One of them is, similar to Approach, 9 mana at sorcery speed is a difficult ask. Now, we don't have the counter here, but we do... What did our opponent target? Can I tell? I can't really tell. I'm pretty sure they targeted Teferi a bunch. Or is it only us? How do I tell what has been targeted with Fight with Fire? I can't see where the targets are, so that is a frustrating bug that I hope they fix. But I think in this case, since I don't know, I'm going to have to click resolve. I can tell some of it's going to my face. If I click resolve though, at least we get the big pull from tomorrow. And hopefully we can get another Teferi to resolve. It's a little unnerving though, as I should be able to have my Teferi doing work. Since I can't see it, I'm going to bounce my Teferi and decide that's the road I'm going to take. But if everything went to my dome, I'm going to be really frustrated and annoyed. Let's see how much hits us. Only one, so our opponent was trying to kill both planeswalkers and me, so I'm glad we made that play. It's still really annoying that we couldn't tell. I know it flashed for a second, but I'm looking for a little more than that, a little more than a flash. Well, drawing Lyra is pretty spectacular. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have played both and then untapped 2 lands. Our opponent will likely kill the Dawnbringer. If our opponent has another Fight with Fire, they can kill the Teferi as well. I suppose there's not much I can do about that than untap and pull from tomorrow like a beast. Let's start with Teferi. Maybe we'll draw something that makes this work.
Let's slow this. Hold that thought.
That doesn't make it work. I think I go for the play. Then at least he can't go to my dome, and he's down 2 Fight with Fires. Lyra's not going to do much else in this game, and at least in this scenario, gives me a sort of a time walk opportunity to force my opponent to deal with Lyra. And there's the Conjecture. So our opponent will get back... I would get back... Blink of an Eye? I guess so. Yep. So our opponent was second Conjecture here. Next turn they'll get back Fight with Fire if the Conjecture is still around. We can try to find a Blink of an Eye or a Cast Out to remove it. We can also try to bury it with Teferi, which is interesting. Here comes a Blink of an Eye on Teferi. Okay. And with Kicker, so our opponent taps low to do it. Gaining the life off Lyra is pretty huge. It does make your opponent find more ways to combo us. And don't be fooled by that end turn button. I'm surprised they haven't fixed that yet, but whenever there's first strike damage, you get this end turn option rather than end combat, so watch out. So if we bury this, our opponent doesn't get the Fight Fire with Fire. Since I don't have an answer to that yet, I think it's the right move. And hopefully our opponent plays a non-basic land and we can shuffle it away. There it is. So now, if our opponent wanted this Conjecture back, they shouldn't have played this. We can now make them shuffle, which hides the Conjecture somewhere in the deck again. Of course, there is the rare chance that it could move to the top of the library instead of somewhere lower than second or third, but you take that chance every time. The odds are in your favor. Especially if you're always lucky like I am. Let's do it, Teferi. Let's do it.
Let's skip to the good part.
Feed me more. Excellent. Now if Teferi gets targeted, I don't have to be so protective. So will Lyra go down here? We have Blink of an Eye on the Dawnbringer. No problem. Perhaps an Essence Scatter awaiting Lyra, and that wouldn't surprise me at all. So I'm just not going to grant my opponent the opportunity. Again, we'll save it for if our opponent tries to use all their mana for a Fight with Fire or something of that nature. Oh look, they did find another Conjecture. So what can they get back here? Blink of an Eye, I suppose, is gotta be the main target. Alright, if they use that this turn on Teferi again, we can likely resolve our pull from tomorrow. We haven't seen a hard counter or anything of quite that nature yet. Okay, our opponent's gonna say go. So, let's see if we can pull from tomorrow. I think we leave up enough mana to pay for a Supreme Will. And a Censor, I suppose? So this is a draw 6. Also a commit would be nice, or a cast out. So yeah, we'll do a draw 6. See if our opponent has an answer for this. Okay, still not a cast out. Well, I think Seal Away is an easy discard. And I think cycling this farmland is an easy choice. Opponent's going to use now to blink that, which, I don't know. It does come back with more loyalty, which I can then tick down to bury this in the deck. And there's a cast out, hallelujah. So we'll say my turn. Our opponent knows about Teferi, so we're not gonna try to hide that. And our opponent does not counter, so do we put this back in the deck? I don't think so. I think we try to cast it out. Less conjectures, less win cons for the opponent. Resolves. Got him. Alright, now we'll plus. Now that we know that there isn't something to use our Teferi targeting with.
Hurry!
Another farmland is fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we can definitely discard Seal Away and Seal Away. Our opponent only has 3 cards, which makes... I think Settle, though, is the right discard instead of the Dawnbringer. So I'm still contemplating that I'm probably not going to win this game with Dawnbringer, as our opponent's deck almost surely set up to deal with creatures in all their sizes. And there goes the Sweltering Summons. So untap 2 lands. Always have a field up. End turn. Discard Seal Away. You have to do this very carefully. It's actually really hard to find things to target. Or how to target. Like, it's easy to click on the wrong thing is what I mean. When you're discarding the hand size, the larger your hand is, the harder it is. Alright, our opponent plays a non-basic. So we might be able to use that at some point with the Field of Ruin. Cycle the farmland. Keep the land drops coming. Okay. Teferi going up. Yep. More blue mana is better. I think if our opponent has a counter, let's make them show it to us, as otherwise we're just discarding cards. Seems like a bit of a waste. And again, we get the untap effect from Teferi. Alright, resolve. Probably a lot of the lower burn spells, the Magma Sprays, the Abrades and such. Let's untap the fields. And there's an Abrade. And there's the spray. Our opponent has 1 card left, but we only have 1 hard counter, so I am going to let them kill Lyra. It was never how I planned to win the game. I knew it would take a pretty special set of circumstances. Last card. Possibly a Blink of an Eye. Our opponents used a lot of blinks on Teferi and got them back twice with the Conjecture, so we've seen a lot of blinking, but blinking is not hard removal. So our opponent's drawn their card. Seems like a playable. Maybe they're wondering if they should jam their Locust God or jam their Mirari's Conjecture or their Primal Amulet. Possibly what is on their mind right now. And looking at the Primal Amulet here, they're scooping them up. I don't believe they can win that game. Teferi continuing to tick up, and I think that they are right. Look, we've played 4 games, and we have 2 pieces of progress towards our Attack with 30 Creatures quest. Attack with 30 Creatures quest. Don't worry, we'll get it in a different way. Thank you all for coming out and watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you like blue-white, I hope it gave you some ideas. And if you hate control decks, I hope it gave you some ideas of how to attack them. Those things I would say when I was talking about the worst case scenario, things we didn't want to see, those are what you need to be doing to beat the control. All right, thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you next time.